Hello, everybody. It's Don McKinnon, pastor of Legacy Church. I'm here making my first video. I'm in my studio downstairs. Don't mind all of this. This is right here something from the Worcester Railers game that our church went to on Sunday, and yeah, that was a long time coming. We have a good group of people who really want to just have fellowship with one another, get together and do stuff, and that was something we had done some time ago, and it was something that was basically being asked for by many people to do, and it was a great time. It was a blast. I wish I had I have cowbells from it, and I as one of my church members and friends told me today, they had a blast just watching me be normal, not be Pastor Don, but be Don McKinnon hockey fan. So that was something that was really a blast to do. So this is the first video that we are doing here. This is for the Bivocational Pastors Network, or Kingdom Builders as we call it. And I guess the easiest way I can say, excuse me, I have to keep my throat wet drinking this green cola. I actually like it. But I guess the big thing is, what are we going to do? Bivocational pastors don't get a lot of support, help. I don't know. There's a lot of things we could say that bivocational pastors don't do, and I have been a bivocational pastor pretty much my whole life. Technically, I'm still a bivocational pastor, even though right now I am currently unemployed in the secular realm. But these are the things that we have to come together and see and do, and all sorts of things. And am doing this work as the volunteer director and Southern New England coordinator for the network. And so, we talk, we meet, we discuss some of the things that we are hearing among our peers. And I think, within church circles, we look at church in three realms. You have the established churches, you have the church plants, and you have the church revitalizations or church replants. And we look at those three pastors in three different ways. But I think bivocational and even co-vocational pastors are not seen on the same level. In fact, people struggle to understand why a pastor is bivocational. And within that, we know that bivocational is something that is in the Bible. Paul was a bivocational missionary, and this is something that I think people do not see, do not get, do not understand. And we have to come to this understanding of what is going on. Why is that a thing? And even probably more so, how we can support one another. Especially since our congregations sometimes struggle with the idea of someone who is bivocational. I've heard it in nearly 30 years, or just over 30 years of ministry. I've heard it where people begin to wonder, does the pastor have enough faith? But what I want to do right now is I wrote 10 things, issues, if you will, that affect pastors who are bivocational. These are pastors usually of smaller churches or smaller congregations. This can go hand in hand with revitalization. But these are things that I think we don't think about, and we need to. So I'm hoping that these are encouragements for you. I'm hoping that this is something that you can use to help in sharing with others, whether they're in your congregation or even your pastor circles. But let me begin here. So what are some of those points that we have? Well, the first thing is time management. Balancing responsibilities, multiple responsibilities, pastoral duties, secular job, family life, these can all become overwhelming in a bivocational pastor's life. And what ends up happening in this? Well, many times pastors who cannot balance end up resigning from their position as a pastor, because let me just kind of time out here. Let me say that a lot of these are going to kind of overlap. So I hope you can see this, but this is why I hope we get this, because we need networks, just as we have networks who help church planting and church revitalization. We need networks that help bivocational pastors, and we need networks and denominations to gather together and help bivocational pastors. So that's one of the first things that we have. We have to understand that there is this need for pastors to just have good time management. They're feeling pulled in multiple directions, and they feel like they're never making leeway. They've got this direction, that direction, and they stop and they take a second and they realize that what they have is not working, and not working properly. So we need to gather together, we need to be together, and we need to help one another out. The second point is financial stresses. Smaller churches can't provide a full-time salary for a pastor. In fact, where we get the word co-vocational are pastors who have decided not to take any money from their church, and they are working full-time jobs to support themselves and their families. And that's a big thing all in to itself, so understand that. But the financial stresses of these pastors, it's leading to financial strain and stress. They struggle sometimes even working jobs that pay low. We are in a region right now, it's interesting. Massachusetts, for me, is one of the most expensive states now. I think it's within the top 5 states that are most expensive to live in. And many pastors are finding it hard to find a job that can actually pay them a wage, especially with the housing crisis we're experiencing now. Right now, for a pastor to move into an apartment, any person really, to move into an apartment in Massachusetts, they have to have 5 figures of money to be able to do that, because we're looking at down payments, where first and last rent, you're looking at anywhere between $2,500 to $4,000, and then a security deposit. It's getting ridiculous. This is why we need to be saying to churches, don't sell your parsonage. It's going to cause financial problems down the road for your church when you retire or move on, and that church is looking for the next person. So there are these financial struggles, and then you're in a job. You might have to work 2 or 3 jobs. You have wives that I know this becomes a huge debate now in some pastoral circles, because there are some pastors who think that their wives should be working to help pay instead of staying home and homeschooling. But there are many families that don't, they look at the public school system and they don't want their kids to be involved in what a lot of the public schools teach. And so they want their kids homeschooled, so they lose that income, and the income is just not there. So this is adding to things. And then on top of this, health issues can really tip the scales. If you or your spouse or your children have any kind of health issues, now this is causing a financial stress, because we know this, that medical expenses aren't always covered by insurance. And you might have insurance and you might be able to get a state insurance as a secondary insurance, but even then those two insurances may not pay for everything. And so then there's out-of-pocket expenses that you have to do. So financial stress is becoming a huge thing. And this is leading to the third point, emotional burnout. When we look at this, pastors are carrying a lot of this weight on them, from their pastoral responsibilities to all the pressures that secular work and home life are leading. This is leading to physical and emotional exhaustion. And this is the problem. Many pastors are sitting there and they're working these full-time jobs, and their members, the church is wondering, why isn't the pastor there for me? Why is this going on? What can I do? How can I do this? And they're sitting there struggling. Many people just want to take from the pastor without realizing the emotional response. Many people are sitting there, they get insulted by the way a pastor is doing, not thinking to themselves, this guy's working another job, and I'm taking time from them that he could be spending time with the kids, he could be at the kids' ball game, he could be at this, he could be at that. All they do is they want to eat and not give anything else. They don't want to take the time. And so that becomes part of the emotional burnout that pastors have. And other pastors then begin to wonder if their secular job, especially if it's a good career and something that they're able to do and make a decent living on, they begin to wonder if maybe that's their calling. And so again, we see pastors who leave the ministry and never come back to the ministry because of all that's gone on with them. So these are things that we have to really sit here and think and talk about, because I don't think, especially where we're in a pastoral crisis right now, we're in a shortage of pastors, and this leads to a lot of other things, but I'm going to kind of get to that near the end. But these are things that we need to kind of understand and look at and unpack. The fourth thing is this: there's a lack of support, and this means a lot of things. Bivocational pastors, they're feeling isolated and unsupported by so many factors. They're trying to navigate the challenges of ministry and secular work, and in it, they look at their denominations and their networks who are praising the guys who are in the churches, the larger churches that are able to pay them full time, pay those pastors full time. And so those pastors are able to give more to the church, more time to the church, and then they don't have the stresses at home of trying to make time to be with the wife and kids, or even the financial stresses of affording stuff for the wife and kids. They look at that, they see like all the praise and everything pumped on them because of how they look at their church. They're looking at those churches and, how does that work for them? These guys are struggling in the trenches, and to use a military example, the grunts who are doing most of the work are getting muddy and beat on and everything in the trenches, while the generals are getting the pats on the back. And that's how it starts to be seen. Many see how, a lot of these church networks, a lot of these networks and denominations have church plants, and they see all the support that's given them, the financial help and different things, and they begin to look at like what they're doing, and they begin to wonder, is it worth it? Should I stay in this? Should I go? It becomes a tough discussion, something that we don't want to talk about. We hate that idea, especially in a crisis mode that we are in, where not enough guys are going into the ministry, and this is part and parcel why the lack of support. The lack of support is one of those. They just don't see it. There's nothing. There's no meetups for bivocational guys. There's nothing to do for them. And these guys are just feeling left out. They become cynical in many of the ways that they communicate with one another, with other pastors and other parts of the networks and denominations, because they look and they see and they're like, wow, those guys are really doing well. And I mean, yeah, it happens right now. I'm sitting here unemployed because of health crisis myself, and it's tough. It really is. Do you want to go on? Do you want to? And I understand. I know computers and everything are going to take that word, and no, I'm not talking about doing anything to oneself, but they wonder, is it worth continuing on in ministry? Should I just go ahead and just focus on life? I mean, here I am. I'm going to be 52 this year, and I'm dealing with a lot of stuff with this health. It's a tough road right now. So understand, we need to have that, and we need that help. This leads to an identity crisis. This is number 5 on my list. Bivocational pastors struggle with their identity, feeling torn between the calling of the pastor and their secular job. And what I mean is, many feel more rewarded by their secular job than by their ministry. And because of that, it leads to people leaving ministry altogether. They feel that nobody understands it. Nobody understands the stresses. I've had many people in the last 7 years that I've been here at my church who have not understood what I go through. And then they leave, and they leave all angry because they don't think that I'm listening to them or that I'm doing it wrong, and they don't understand the stresses of a pastor who is bivocational. And this is the thing, many feel more rewarded. I knew a pastor who left his secular job for 2 years because he felt this stress, and he wanted to be more active in his church, and the church still didn't do well, and he went back for a year, back to his secular job, and he started to feel more rewarded by that, but he knew his calling was to ministry. He ended up leaving both the church and that job, went to another state where things financially were more stable for him and his family, and now he's pastoring in another church full-time and doing well, and they're doing well there. And so these are the things that we have to ask. And that's tough to hear, especially in Massachusetts, where I think well, that could become a whole new discussion. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but that's one thing that we have to understand. The other thing is, pastors see themselves as less than a pastor because they see how the others are treated for their quote-unquote success. You know, they see how this guy who has taken over this church, and this guy is like, he's getting support from other churches, and he's able to put more time and effort into the church that he's at, and that church is doing well now, and everybody's like, oh, good boy, good boy. And he sees himself as less. Especially, one thing I've seen here in Massachusetts is I see a lot of the guys coming up from the South, and they have support from their churches and other churches down south. And the native guys, like myself, I'm born and bred Bostonian. I know I don't sound it. I get asked all the time, what part of the country are you from? I was born in West Roxbury, Massachusetts. But I do not sound like a Bostonian because I've spent time around this country. And I've seen it. I've seen how other states are. And yeah, well, I'm sitting here wearing Red Sox stuff today on opening day and love my team. There are times where when things have gotten tough, I've sat there and wondered if maybe I should have stayed in some of the other states that I was at, because I just felt, more at ease at times. But God's called me here for this time and season. And we'll see what happens, but this is what we need to understand at this time. There's a sixth point that I want to focus on: church expectations. Smaller churches have unrealistic expectations of their bivocational pastors, expecting them to be available 24/7. Now, this goes beyond the joke, and it's funny because I mentioned this joke to somebody a couple of days ago, and I was with other pastors, and they backed me up on this. Is many churches want the 30-year-old pastor with 20 years experience, a doctorate degree, and 5 kids and a wife that they can pay $25,000 a month, or not a month, a year or two, to come and take over their church. It sounds unrealistic, but many churches have unrealistic expectations. They expect the pastor to be able to answer the phone in the middle of the night and be at the hospital, even though he's got to be to work the next day to put bread on the table, to be able to support his own family, because the church isn't paying him anything, or barely paying him anything. Many people leave those kind of churches when they call in a crisis and the pastor is at work and unable to pick up the phone. Now, understand, I'm not complaining. This isn't anything to do with my church. I do bivocational ministry because that's what I'm called to for this time and season. But this is what we see, not just, for what I've seen, but this is what a lot of bivocational pastors see and share with one another out there. And these are the things that we have to do. In fact, others wonder if the pastor is working his job because he lacks the faith to just rely on what the church is paying him, and they see his other job as less important, or that he sees the church as less important. These are the things that we have to go through. This can lead to a number 7, and this is something I know I have dealt with recently: self-care. Bivocational pastors end up neglecting their own physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being due to the demands of multiple roles. Pastors sometimes lack taking time for themselves to go to a doctor's appointment because they are being tossed and torn by their flocks wanting their attention multiple times a day. And that's what happened to me. I missed many doctor's appointments. I didn't make any doctor's appointments for several years, and I ended up with ketoacidosis and getting diagnosed with diabetes last year. And this is the thing that I don't think a lot of people understand in bivocational ministry. This is the thing that a lot of people have to understand that goes on. And so, what are those things that we do? We have to take time for self-care. These are the things that need to be understood, but self-care is hard for somebody who's working a 40-hour-a-week job and then expected by some people to work another 40-hour-a-week job with the church. So there's a lot of things. That leads to number 8, family strains. The demands of church life, the demands of bivocational ministry can put strains on family relations, particularly when their family feels neglected or overlooked. Pastors are going to miss their kids' ball games, or football games, or hockey games, or soccer games, or karate tournaments, or wrestling matches, or gymnastics events, or whatever, dance recitals, music recitals. Why? Because they are trying to find the time to disciple people and do Bible study and other things within the life of a church, and this is causing a lot of stress on pastors. The other thing is they end up missing date time with their wives. Sometimes people will, be at the church and expect the pastor to talk to them. Well, the pastor's trying to get out the door because he has time that he's trying to put aside for his wife, because he hasn't seen his wife for hours, and I mean like 24, 48 hours. Because she's been out taking the kids to their games and their other things that they're doing. We don't think about that. We don't think about it. And this is what we need to do. We need to be thinking about this. So there are the family strains that are going on. The other thing is ministry effectiveness. Bivocational pastors may feel that their effectiveness in ministry is compromised due to the limitations of their time and energy that's involved. In other words, look at it this way. Some pastors are working 40 to 60 hours a week, and that's at their secular job. That's leaving little time for them to have for the church. And many are more than willing to give up because of that. Many of them are more than willing to give up because they look at other full-time pastors who are able to give their time and energy to the church, and they see those churches growing, they see those churches flourishing, and they just want to throw their hands up and give up. They think it's no longer worth it to do that. And that's what we got to understand. That's what we have to do. That's what we have to figure out in all these things, how this is going to work and how this is going to be at play in a lot of things. And so what ends up happening is they lack energy. They know that they're supposed to go out into the public square and evangelize, but when they are working full-time jobs and have very little time left for their family, they begin to wonder, is it worth it? They're struggling to find time to go into the public circle and, square and call people to Christ and to meet with people and disciple them and all these things, but they don't have the energy to help these people become disciple makers and really, in truth, take some of the load off of them. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people need to understand that more than not. And there are people in churches, like I said, there are those people in the churches that want, but they're not willing to give. And, I'm not talking money. I'm talking like, I love Jesus and I want to do everything I can for my Lord and Savior. They're not willing to do that. And that becomes a frustration. And that's where the ministry effectiveness, the pastors are wondering, is this still worth it to do? This leads to the final point, sustainability. Bivocational pastors may wonder, how can they sustain their ministry over long term, given the challenges and stresses that they face working a full-time job and working basically full-time ministry? Many are saying right now the future of the church is bivocational ministry, and what's ended up happening is those pastors who have been at it for a long time are beginning to see that there are faults in that thinking, because there is no foothold. They haven't had any foothold. And they're seeing the faults in the model because whatever reason it is, they're not able to do it. Somewhere along the line, the church became professional. I heard it recently at a discipleship conference as the man leading it said, basically, when Constantine stopped the persecution of the church in 325 AD and made them more professional, he took away this vital aspect of Christian ministry, which was how to be an effective bivocational minister. And we see that, and this is where a lot of people are struggling right now. In fact, more pastors I'm beginning to hear through the pipeline right now is more pastors are looking for churches that they can merge with in their towns and their cities and everything, because one, we have a lack of pastors. We might talk about that down the road, but we do have a lack of pastors going into ministry because they hear all this. They don't want to put themselves $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in debt through seminary, maybe even more, and then go to a church that can barely afford to pay them, and then they're going to have to get a job that pays well in a career that they didn't go into, that they didn't study for. You can see the circle, how this is. So a lot of pastors now are beginning to look about how they can merge with other churches, and maybe the two pastors stay bivocational, but now that church is able to flourish a little bit more, and who knows what happens out of that. So it brings me to this. 5 things I want to bring to you to address these issues. It's essential for us as bivocational pastors to prioritize self-care and stress management. I'm saying that from experience. Now listen, I'm still walking with a cane right now. I had knee surgery in September because of my own neglect of health. I lost my job. And right now I've been told I might not be able to go back to work. And because of the job that I was doing, because I don't have Social Security, I'd have to go on what's SSDI, which is not my retirement sum. And it's not enough for us to survive on in any state. So it's one of those things that I'm saying from my own experience. Get yourself to the doctor, get yourself to the gym, get yourself checked out, because there's a lot there that has to be done. Another thing is communicate openly with your church. And talk to your family about the needs and limitations that you have. One thing I used to do, I gave half my check back to the church. I'm surviving on very little as it is with what the church gives me. And luckily I have the love of some supporters who look at me as a missionary. And that's how we're able to make it for now. But I was giving back half my check to the church, and finally my trustee had to sit down with me and say, you don't have to do that anymore. We're doing well. And I'm still giving what I give because, the Lord has laid it on my heart to give more than just a tithe. But I will say this, I'm probably going to be working till I die. And that's just life. That's just the way it is. But it doesn't make me hate ministry. It doesn't make me want to give up ministry. But it's what we do. The other thing, and this is where I get a lot, seek support from peers and mentors. And, let it be known to denominational leaders too. The stresses that you're going through, how tough it is. I think if more denominations and networks went ahead and did something like a night or a conference or something where they can just bring in the bivocational guys and celebrate them and encourage them and lift them up, that would be awesome. That's what we are going to be doing. We have here with the Bivocational Network, because we're all volunteers and we're all bivocational, we've been able to raise some money to do something for our group. And so in September, I have to look at the date right now, but I know in September we are going to have a bivocational pastors encouragement dinner for the pastors and their families. And so that's going to go out. And I'm excited about that. I really am. Because I don't think enough people understand what's going on. With that, I would also say develop healthy boundaries and time management strategies. I've had to learn that the hard way. And even now, I still learn because parts of me stay up later than I should. And, even my wife was just speaking me to today, saying, I think you're starting to come down with a cold because you're not giving yourself the time that you need. Because I'm sitting here and I'm trying to work a lot of stuff out that we have coming up. And that's just the way it is. But we have to create the boundaries. We have to create time management strategies. We have to do stuff. The last part is this. We have to cultivate a strong sense of identity and calling as bivocational pastors. Many of us, it's easy. I'm speaking from experience. It's easy to go on social media, and believe me, I've had people recently tell me you shouldn't be on social media, but honestly, that's how I stay in touch with people I graduated with, people I went to Bible college with, people I went to seminary with, people I went to high school with. That's how we stay in touch, because even though we have cell phones, not all of us like to share our number. And believe me, I'd rather do the social media because this is for my family and for my church to be able to contact me. So that's what we have to do. That's what we're going to do. That's what we need to do. But we need to, get that strong sense of identity. What it means to be a bivocational pastor. I know that there's some books out there about it, but, I'm kind of thinking we're at this point in the early years of bivocational ministry being the accepted new form that we were 10 years ago when church revitalization was becoming a big thing. So we'll see how that goes. But that's it. That's where we are at. That's what we are doing. That's what I have for you today. I'm really hoping that it's helped you. I know this is a long form video. I'm hoping it's not going to be as long in the future, but we'll see how it goes. I've lost my voice. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. I will see you. These videos are not going to be a daily thing because, hey, I'm bivocational. So once a week, we're going to drop these videos off. All right? Okay, so I will see you all. Go Red Sox.